Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 67 with Dr. Daniel Freed, somebody who I bumped into and was lucky enough to chat with, network at a recent New York EdTech event that I went to. He's doing really interesting work, as you know, with his day job working in higher ed, but also what he's doing on the side with his biochemistry literacy for kids project. So it's a really interesting endeavor working with school districts and homeschooled children to really kind of believe in their capacity and set high expectations for their understanding and learning and kind of putting science into relevance of the real world. So really, really interesting stuff. Really glad I got the chance to talk more to Dan and learn more about his story and the work that he's doing and his philosophy. So check out the work that he's doing and all the other stuff that we talk about down in the show notes. And again, thanks so much for listening. Without further ado, this is episode number 67 with Dr. Daniel Freed. Start as we always do. If you want to give a brief introduction of yourself and your professional journey of how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Dan Freed. I'm a chemistry professor at St. Peter's University in Jersey City. And I had a very long trip through higher ed. I started off in 2000 at Temple University as a music education major. So I wasn't always a science person, but after some really interesting experiences that I had at Temple in kind of looking into cognitive science and music learning and thinking about the brain, I kind of wanted to change directions, and I ended up becoming a biochemistry major. I transferred to Binghamton after my experience at Temple and finished up my undergrad in Binghamton as a biochem major. Then I was lucky enough to go to Yale for my PhD. So worked in a protein folding lab, an amazing experience there as well, being around so many different amazing minds, scientific minds in Yale. And 7 short years later, I ended up doing my postdoc at the Weizmann Institute of Science. I left the country for that. And when I returned 3 years later, I became a assistant professor of chemistry at Kean University in New Jersey, and now I'm at St. Peter's University doing chemistry courses and doing some research in chemistry learning as well. So that's where I currently am.
Yeah, and I know you. I guess this might be an interesting segue because I think taking education classes and learning seems to have been just like a through line for a lot of things that you've done, which it's kind of, I don't know, just interesting. I think where there's usually a common denominator for people that there's like some core to them, which I think for me also like working in education spaces, obviously there's a lot of people that go to school and then they're done. They go out and into the working world and doing whatever they may do, but always wanting to, I think we share this, like having that sort of core and that sort of pull to work with people and understand how they learn best and support that and, passing on knowledge and all those sort of things. So I guess if you want to talk a little bit more about that and just like how all of that's going to come together now with the current work that you're doing and just talking through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I've been kind of reflecting back on my journey a lot lately as we're making some more progress with my biochemistry for kids program. But something actually that goes all the way back to those first college days at Temple seems to have been a really formative thing for me. So I thought it'd be cool to talk about that. While I was a music ed major, and this goes to what you were saying about thinking about how people think and how do people learn. So one of the opportunities I had at Temple was to work in an early childhood music center in central Philadelphia. And in this center, we were actually using kind of really cool theory of music learning called the Gordon method. And we were working with very young learners, toddlers, babies even, doing special exercises with them, singing certain songs to them, kind of giving them a very enriched musical vocabulary. And that experience really stuck with me because you would see like little glimmers of the babies and the toddlers starting to understand music in a way that you didn't think was possible. And that experience really stuck with me, and it kind of made me think like maybe there's more that's possible from people than we really, previously imagined. And that kind of is really formed the foundation of what I'm doing now, bringing very high level biochemistry concepts to elementary school learners. So it's really cool. I kind of like forgot about that for so long, but I didn't realize how much that affected me. Those experiences in music school.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that is connecting the kind of the college experience, and certainly that like time when we're exploring just who we are and
Sure.
what we're about and our values, and that kind of being something that like you said, especially has manifested a lot now. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing at St. Peter's as well, but like with this biochemistry for kids program that you're doing, I know that's originally how we met, was kind of talking about that. So in terms of that specifically, like in that journey of kind of nurturing this project, like what has that meant to you, or what have you enjoyed about it? Because it seems like obviously it's very related to the skills and the knowledge that you've gained over time, but also is like independently your own thing and trying to like make connections and, broaden the impact of that. So I guess what's been kind of like resonating and enjoyable for that kind of side project, and then we'll speak a little bit more to the other kind of your full-time, day job sort of thing too. But.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's part of what you said was great. It's, you don't really know what the future impact will be of some of these experiences that you create for yourself. So, something you do 10 years ago may end up being the most important thing 10 years later. So that's kind of what happens a lot, that I've, started to realize that. So I always try to never say no to something, because you never know where that will take you later. So your question was about how I kind of developed this biochemistry literacy for kids program. This started at Yale. So during my PhD, I was working in a protein folding lab. We were studying fluorescent sensors of protein folding. So that means that we had certain small molecules that were actually a dye molecule that would glow if you shine light on it. Those molecules were glowing when we would stick them to a folded protein, a healthy protein, and they wouldn't glow when we tried to react them with an unhealthy protein. And that was one of the main parts of my research. And I thought this was just the most amazing thing, to be able to explore the nano world to this level. Like, I just never thought that people could know this stuff. So what I wanted to do was like share this with people, because I didn't see like, why should I have waited until my mid-20s to begin learning like the little pieces of what, a human being was made out of. I thought that, everyone should know that much earlier. So that's where I started working on these classes. I was able to use a room at Yale's Peabody Museum, which is a really famous archaeology museum, and basically kind of convene the classes myself, and kind of began testing, like asking, like, could kids really be interested in these cool biochemistry topics that I was studying as a grad student. And it turned out that they just were eating it up. Like they couldn't get enough of it. And we ended up doing a little bit of piloting in the New Haven public schools as well, through a really good friend of mine. And took a little pause when I was at my postdoc, but that was kind of the foundation of the project. As a professor, it was a little bit easier for me to get schools to let me kind of run pilot programs. And really, it was just about sharing what I thought was really wonderful knowledge that I feel like should have been part of school, much earlier, like stuff that I wish that I learned in school, and kind of trying to deliver it in a really kid-friendly, like engaging way, and giving people what I think that they want to know about the world, and that they didn't always get in the standard, model of the curriculum. So that was kind of the why I do it, the motivation for why I'm doing it. There's also, I think it really can help with self-esteem, and it empowers students to learn this way. And I also think that it will improve test scores and achievement as well.
Sure.
So I just really love working on the project. It's what I live for, really, every day.
Yeah. Well, I guess like just to linger on that for a little bit longer too, like, because I guess to confirm my understanding, like for right now, like it seems like it fits in well with like it being kind of like a quote unquote, like just sort of like science camp kind of thing. Like people kind of opt in if they're like really interested and want to learn more. So I'm sure it's also like people who are very curious, they can, yeah, like have this really formative educational experience about something that they're really interested in and achieves all those other things like you were mentioning. If it's like, oh, I'm not really being challenged, or I you know, want to nurture this sort of interest as I go through school or something, it seems like, yeah, I can fit in really well just having that, that sort of like specialized opportunity that like parents can opt their kids into, or kids are like, oh, I see that, you know, I want to do that, you know. But I guess is that sort of how you see it fitting in? And I get because
yeah. So it's definitely can be that also. You know, we're getting interest from homeschool parents. Like, you know, homeschool parents just this is what they have been looking for. You know, when people find out about it, so they love it. Especially for some of these very high achieving kids, you know, you can't give them enough material for them to learn. They just want to learn more and more. So this is a very rich curriculum. So it's great for them. But most of the development has been done in, you know, regular public schools with you know kids, the kind of kids that you grew up with.
Right.
They love it. It's been deployed in a couple public schools already, kind of during the school year, which I'm really so happy about. Last year we had year-long programs. They basically created some elective class where the kids could really study this all year. And we're really happy that those kind of beta testing experiences went really well. So I do think that it could be part of a normal school curriculum. And it really enhances it, and it can help people understand what's already in the standards, like what they already have to learn. It kind of gives them a more solid foundation, and it allows teachers to kind of get more in-depth questions going, and it kind of gets the kids a lot more motivated also.
Gotcha.
So I think it's an enrichment thing, but I think it's also something that everyone should know, and just trying to convince more people that biochemistry could be done at these earlier levels. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah. And then it even makes more sense too that there's not like, if it's just an elective in a public school, it's not like you have to kind of go out of your way to have that kind of opportunity. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah,
I guess,
so we'll see it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess as we kind of segue to your other day job too, like, is there anything that you feel like you've learned through like managing this project that you haven't gotten like doing other things? Because I think that idea of like this side project, it, you know, maybe additional things that you're doing sometimes in addition to other work that you're doing. But what do you feel like it's gained? What do you feel like you've gained or learned from it, being this kind of project that you've done through, I guess, institutions and stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also a research project, so it is very closely connected to my normal professional life. We're able to publish some peer-edited articles on the methodology, so it is fitting into my my tenure case and everything. Gotcha. So I'm really fortunate that I was able to find something that I was so passionate about, and it started off as really something extra and something that, I don't know if anyone believed in it in the beginning, but it is something that has been useful for me professionally. So I'm really happy that that's happening. And I have a couple really great education and psychology professors who are collaborating to design new studies, and I'm hoping that more people are interested. So I just was very lucky that it's working out that way, because I definitely could have gone the other way. There's also a great feedback between working with very young students. So I've taught hundreds of students, probably thousands of students with this method. There's a great feedback between working in K-12 and then working in higher ed with adults, right, with college students. You kind of get this kind of dialectic going where you have a core curriculum that you developed for your college courses, and then you have to say, how can we make this kid friendly? Like, what can we do to make it more interesting for kids and kind of hook them into it? Then once that's developed for the kids and you've piloted it and tested it with the kids, you bring it back to higher ed, and then it's just so much better than it was before, and you can reach even more students this way, your normal college students, and then you kind of iterate the process. So that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. There are some weeks I'll teach the same unit to elementary, junior high, high school, and college kids all in the same week, and just kind of see how each age group reacts to it. Surprisingly, not that different. Surprisingly, I think if you're a new learner to a subject, you see the subject the same way. You kind of deal with it the same way, almost independent of age. That's kind of the thing that I've started to notice about it. So it's been just like a fascinating experience just doing this wacky project
Yeah.
over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, and I guess I'm glad that it's like integrating into with like a little bit more of like your day job, that kind of thing. Because I
Yeah.
think that can be what's hard about it is that like, oh, okay, I've got a full enough plate with teaching and research, and then I still want to do this other side project. So I think that that's it's good if it feels a bit more seamless and then literally as you're mentioning, it's like, yeah, I'm teaching the same thing across all these age groups and kind of is like symbiotically perhaps, like benefiting where it's like, oh, well, fairly, like you're mentioning it, like it's going to be fairly the same introducing a new concept to somebody who's coming at it fresh. So it's like, you may tinker, but no, I wonder, I guess, like if you have maybe found things that like benefit you for other groups and stuff too. But, yeah, I mean, that's really awesome. I guess if we'll then kind of point our direction to kind of wrap up this part with like your current work, teaching courses and working within higher ed as a faculty, and that you've, I think, done a lot of different things within
Yeah.
the higher ed landscape through like your graduate work and doctorate work and everything. So what engages you about being in this space as sort of like this is, a bit more of your anchor, I guess, like what has been kind of enjoyable about this experience over, over the whole course of time?
Yeah, no, I've worked with such amazing people over the years. In even back to undergrad, I had an advisor who, not a lot of people realize that you can go to graduate school as a science major for free. That these are funded programs. So I'll never be able to repay this person, my undergrad research advisor, for saying, Dan, like you have pretty good grades. Why don't you apply to some of these amazing schools? And they're free. Like why don't you just try it? Like I never would have known that. So these people just they direct your life in ways that that are just astounding. They give you these opportunities. Once I was at my PhD program, I had an amazing boss, also just a completely brilliant person. This is someone who thinks of more ideas in a week than most people can think of in a year, probably. So just so much creativity there, and that also really sticks with me too. Being around, in these great institutions, being around people that have such creative abilities. It really makes you want to do the same. It makes you want to do something great as well. And not just my advisor, but everyone you see in these places. Same thing in my postdoc institution. So I think when you're around these people, you want to do something great to change the world because they're doing that also. Where I am now is and also my first university. I worked with wonderful faculty. Everyone is so student centered in the places where I've been. They've been teaching colleges, so everyone really wants to help the students. We spend a lot of time with them. We just want them to succeed. So it's great being around a group of people that have that focus, and the people that end up in these small undergraduate teaching institutions. They want the kids to do well. So it's just great to be around like-minded people like that. My department's great. We have a kind of a growing chemistry department, which is great. So it's been really, really a wonderful experience being a faculty. Like being a faculty is like the best job for someone who's, I guess, a geeky kind of person. So all I get to do, I get to sit home, research cool stuff that I think is like amazing, make a presentation, and then I have a captive audience that comes to me and I get to talk about that stuff the next day. So like that's like how much better could that be? So that's what I really love about the job is just coming up with things that I think are interesting and researching, and then trying to convey that and convey my excitement about these topics to people who come to hear me talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I appreciate the geeky connection as a good segue. But just even then, like that being like, yeah, literally like what the job is. But then, like you
It
mentioned,
is what the job is.
like doing that job in an environment like the people, I think is certainly my experience as well working within higher ed, that like the people are just so great to work with and work around and have that energy. Like you mentioned, I think it can be hard to replicate elsewhere. And if you're coming up with, your lecture, your presentation for a class, it's like you're around people that can, help come up with great ideas and inspire you and everything. So, Yeah, so I don't know. That is just always when I have people, I always I'm kind of attracted them for podcast guests of like that. I feel like they really fit the bill of hired geeks and everything. So if it's anything that's sort of helping to inspire you with your job or other stuff that you're just kind of like personally enjoying, what are you geeking out about right now? And is it like new stuff that you're just discovering or stuff that you've always been into, or just anything that comes to mind of like what's really grabbing your attention?
Yeah. So I was trying to think about this question. We have a toddler at the moment. We have he's almost 2.5, and I'm geeking out about all the things that he is learning about the world and trying to find the things that I like, distill the most amazing parts of life that I can kind of convey to him and have him experience. So what we've been listening to a lot of is classical music. So, it's everything is so fast these days, and people are not spending time kind of slowing down for some kind of long format media and things. One of the few sorts of screen times that he's allowed is to watch classical music concerts. So we've gotten really into kind of Baroque music and things. This kid loves the oboe. The first thing he says in the morning while he's eating breakfast, he says, "Can I see the oboe?" He wants to watch an oboe concerto. So we know all the oboe concertos that have ever been written, probably, or at least that are on YouTube. We love Recorder from Telemann. He's into that also. So, that's something I didn't think that I would get from having a kid, but just kind of being able to slow down and kind of experience music again. I had this music background, but you just didn't really have time to just listen to a whole symphony anymore. Like who can do that anymore? But because of how we want him to, get into music and start his life and understand music, we just will sit and watch, a whole concerto of something, like all 3 movements, and that's really been great. Also exploring nature, he wants to know what everything is. I'm sort of a naturalist person, so I do know a little bit about nature, but he wants to know, every leaf and bug and flower. So I've had to kind of re-explore and discover, my natural surroundings and try to tell him what everything is. So that's been what we've been working on. Having a kid takes up any spare time you thought you had or you didn't even have. He's taking that up now. So we're trying to make that time as worthwhile for everybody and especially him. So that's part of what I'm geeking out about right now, I would say.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah, and I mean, and just the idea of like seeing the world through a child's eyes and just like allows you to slow down or just have a little bit more of that sense of wonder, I'm sure. But and I feel like that's smart of just like it's like if you kind of want your child to sit down and kind of not be getting into anything, it's like usually I think a lot of people it's like you're going to put on a cartoon or do whatever, but it's like really they just want like some sort of like stimulation. So it's like put on a YouTube video of like a classical music concert.
They'll
like
watch
brilliant.
anything. They'll watch anything. So you might as well show them something that has some cultural value to it. And he's used to seeing that, and he doesn't know some of the other things that exist. So for him, this is it's amazing for him to see this one particular guy play this Mozart oboe concerto. He just loves this guy, so it's fine with me to watch.
I can only imagine though it'll just be kind of funny because it'll just make it a little bit harder as like any child like grows older and they start going to school. It's just like then you start having all the like all the other kids are doing things or whatever, and it's like, well, hopefully maybe he could like turn some other kids on to like classical concerts and stuff or stuff. I don't know. But that's great. Well. And I guess that kind of alludes to like some of your, hobbies and stuff like that. And, in terms of still having like music be, having an important role in your life and hiking and being interested in nature and those sort of things. So I guess anything with like those sort of hobbies and how they've kind of contributed to your life, or I guess if it's sort of bleeding into also just like the stuff that you have been consuming specifically on any of those topics that you want to recommend. But certainly if there's anything that comes to mind of like how the hobbies that you have positively contributed to your life.
Yeah. So part of the thing that I've always kind of been conscious of is, whatever's going on in your life, whatever hobby you have or whatever interest you have, like try to hold on to that and try to like kind of meld it into the other parts of your life, and maybe like other things emerge from that. So the project, the learning project, the biochemistry learning project, it's kind of the real example of this. It's really very part of my personality. So all the different parts of my life are kind of getting kind of squished into this project. The music pedagogy stuff, the idea of that more things are possible, the things that I learned about a long time ago. The other kind of set of hobbies that I have is art. So unfortunately, I don't do too much art anymore. But in grad school, I was learning classical painting and sculpting. I guess it was sort of a procrastination so that I could avoid writing my thesis towards the end there. So I was like, my thesis is almost due. I better start learning, painting. Like that's a good idea. So I really love painting and sculpting. I'm hoping to get back into it, especially now that we have our son. I want him to start. We do Play-Doh sculptures, but I want him to see. I want him to see me doing it so that he wants to do it also. And the other really great foundation for the learning project actually came from art, and this is something that kind of got squished into the whole project, and that is this very realistic drawing technique that's designed by this art educator named Betty Edwards. So I talk about it in one of the videos on the website, but this had a really profound influence on me too. So her method is also about kind of taking a novice artist and giving them certain exercises, things to think about, and then they become, so much better of a realistic artist. And it's kind of hard to believe some of the results she gets, but that idea of looking at the world and kind of really seeing what something is and being able to copy it and draw it and appreciate it, that really is something that I love doing. I love realistic art, and I also love this idea of looking at science, looking at the world, and trying to make sense of it, and try to do that in a really quick and rewarding way for myself and for other people. Because if you're doing a project, if you're doing something like this, you have to really want to do it every minute. Like you have to be rewarded for to learn and to develop it. So if you're being rewarded, if it's a great experience for you, then that'll just carry over to other people. So that's another big thing. So I actually, maybe I'm inspired by this podcast to get back into my hobbies now that my I'm kind of getting a little bit more established as a professor, and kind of get back into art again. That's one thing I hope to do next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like you said too, I mean, just having it kind of fit in, like, I guess what I'm sort of hearing, like it kind of like fitting in with your life, like you're mentioning, like, I'll probably, get back into some art pieces when like I can do it with my child, because that would like fit in, where it's not as if it's like, get away, like other responsibilities, I'm doing art now. It's like, no, like doing it in a way that makes sense. Because I can also imagine like people, because I think it comes up for me with certain things with like content creation, I have certain knowledge, which working with other colleagues where, who are in like marketing and stuff like that, I kind of have the vernacular. So it's like, yeah, this is sort of like, how kind of a hobby of just like learning about, website design and SEO or whatever. It's like, I just kind of have some basic understanding that helps me work with other people better. And then it's like, yeah, I know, basics of art or how to help somebody, develop, sculpting or painting or whatever. So it's like, yeah, that's like just another option, an opportunity for an activity with a child. So like that kind of fits in naturally. Or it was like, oh, I need to design a new logo for my like teaching like for your website. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I know how to like draw something up to like maybe give to somebody to make whatever. But it's, yeah, just like that idea of like the fluidity of things integrating naturally, but then also that, and the same sense, I guess, of kind of fluidity. And it's definitely how my brain works now. And just now with like the wealth of knowledge about anything that you can choose to pursue, like on the internet, is that anymore it's less about like, well, I have to come up with a completely new way to teach something because like, I'm deciding to teach, so I have to like come up with my own way. It's like with anything really, it's like, I think about connecting the dots and kind of taking inspiration from a lot of things that are already out there. And then you can kind of create something unique by, kind of mashing things together, or, just kind of finding how it fits in for you as well. But I just appreciate that sentiment. I think that I was kind of hearing from you is that you definitely take the best from what you've been able to observe for other people, or, just like integrate things in fluidly to how you do your work. So
and the unique thing, the unique history of every person, creates their personality, but it creates what they are capable of doing. And it's great to try to draw on everyone's unique histories to come up with something that's like creative and new. And everyone can do that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of just like good like advice if you're trying to like refresh the work that you're doing or pursuing something new. It's like, yeah, taking inspiration from others, finding how it might fit in well for you personally, and not feeling as though it's like, well, I got to kind of grit and kind of push through friction and like whatever to just like figure it out on my own. Yeah, just in any number of aspects and any number of ways you can learn a lot from others and take inspiration, but also find a way to make it, uniquely your own as well. So, so I guess in that spirit, like, is there anything that you are reading, watching, and or listening to in any of the time that you may have, I guess, anything that you'd want to make sure to kind of name drop so we can include in the show notes, things that are, have been helpful to you, or maybe just like, again, kind of like classics for you, like all-time favorite things that you kind of geek out about, anything that comes to mind?
Sure. Again, with the experiencing things again with our son, if people haven't seen this already, they should check out the original Cosmos series by Carl Sagan. So have you seen this when you were younger? Or
I did not. I know of it, but
Okay.
I've never seen it myself.
So this is, I think, the finest work of scientific communication ever written. Carl Sagan he was a Cornell astrophysicist, astrobiologist. He was involved with the Voyager mission. And, back in the late 70s, he and his wife, Andrienne, and others wrote this wonderful documentary about everything, really, about the cosmos, about chemistry, evolution, biology, the history of science, civilization, and it's on YouTube. We own the DVDs and everything, but this is something that I'm experiencing again with my son. And actually, I always wanted to give this experience to my whatever children I had, because it's a way to connect with the world in a manner that I just don't see happening any other way. And it has such a formative meaning for me as well. When I was a kid, I remember some of the scenes from this, vividly as a little kid watching this with my dad. So if you haven't seen this, if you want to see some of the most wonderful poetic communication about science and really about anything, it holds up really well, even though it's pretty it's been a while since it was out.
Right.
But I'd really recommend watching it. Even it's like a classic thing. But I don't think anyone's ever done better. It's a way of making people really want to know science and to realize that science is really, it's not just about solving problems and curing things. It's really about almost like a spiritual connection with your surroundings. And that's something that, school curriculum, I don't know if there's a standard for that. Like, do you feel spiritually connected to your surroundings as a result of the science class? But that's what this does. And I try to emulate that. He's such a genius in the way he did it. But I'm trying to do that in what I do. So I would recommend doing that. That's a simple recommendation, a nice classic of scientific, popularization of science. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and it's good that it's available just widely, on YouTube, just to have that there. But
yeah,
so yeah, we'll link out to that for sure. But then I guess definitely in a similar sort of sentiment as the cosmos and this sort of like very like optimistic kind of spiritual connection and all that kind of good stuff that I love. Ending the episode on the optimistic note that I like to wrap things up on. What is something or things that you're looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world? So any of those categories or all of them, just anything that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, sure. Few things there. So, when I'm teaching my any of my science classes, I always tell my students that this is an amazing time to be studying science, because we're answering the questions that, people have been wondering about for thousands of years. People have wanted to know, how does the body work at this atomic level? Things about, astronomy we're figuring out. Things that we never thought we would know. So I'm just really excited. Every year, new things coming out. When I design my lessons, I'm using data that's coming out maybe like a year or two before, and I tell the students we didn't know this stuff before. And it's just amazing to realize that we're living in this time when things are becoming knowable. So I'm looking forward to science, I guess. The other thing I'm looking forward to is kind of trying to get this crazy project that I developed, trying to get this more out into the world. So there's all kinds of cool developments with it that are going to happen this year. Hopefully, more schools will hopefully get interested, and we have actually a lot of interest from homeschool parents on it. So I'm just really looking forward to sharing this, kind of giant project that I created, having more people experiencing and having it spread. When you create something that's kind of new, it's a little bit controversial, and not everyone believes you right away. So I think now it's starting to catch on, where we have enough people that are doing it, where it's really going to start to snowball a little bit. So I'm really, really excited about the coming year for the biochemistry literacy project. Seeing more kids get the learning that I wanted to have myself as a kid. So it's just really cool for me to see, little kids learning so quickly what took me, years and years and years of figuring out to do. So that's really an amazing thing that I've started to experience this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how that progresses for you. And so glad that I could just share out, the good work that you're doing and learn a little bit more about your background. And appreciate you making time for the show. So yeah, we'll link out ways to check out the work that you're doing and connect with you down in the show notes and everything else that we mentioned here. But yeah, again, just thank you so much for hanging out and chatting and sharing all that you did.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was such a privilege, and it's really great to talk to you. And I love the podcast as well.
This podcast is part of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices in the higher ed community. Check us out on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod or at connectedu.network. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.